Assalamu alaikum students, a very good morning to you all. I hope you all are fine and doing well. Today we'll be discussing a very important topic, that is anti-hyperlipidemics or drugs used in the treatment of dyslipidemia or hyperlipidemia. It is important from examination point of view and practically as well. You must have seen a lot of people saying that they have high levels of cholesterol or high level of triglycerides. So, as the name shows, hyperlipidemia means increase in the level of plasma lipids. Either it is cholesterol or triglyceride. And after becoming a doctor, inshallah, you will encounter a lot of people with hyperlipidemia because it is a very important metabolic disorder these days due to consumption of a lot of junk food and fast food and the diet rich in saturated fats and sedentary lifestyle. Because of all these reasons, hyperlipidemia is really common. It is the most common cause or a risk factor for the development of atherosclerosis, and you know that atherosclerosis is the leading cause of death in Western countries. So you can imagine how important this topic is and how crucial it is to treat hyperlipidemia, because it will end up in very serious conditions. So let's get started. Let's check out today's learning objectives. By the end of today's lecture, you should be able to classify different drugs used to treat dyslipidemias. This is a very important question and it often comes in exams, and enumerate their mechanism of action, uses, and adverse effects. Mostly the adverse effects of drugs used for dyslipidemias are asked in exams. So before going into the detail, you must recall what are lipoproteins. You have already studied them in biochemistry, so I need you to recall them. We'll have a quick recap of lipoproteins, their types, and then we'll start the treatment of hyperlipidemia. So what are lipoproteins? Lipoproteins are basically macromolecular complexes that transport lipids in the blood. The plasma lipids, triglycerides, cholesterol, and phospholipids, being insoluble in plasma, are transported in a protein capsule which is known as lipoprotein. And apolipoproteins are the proteins on the surface of lipoproteins which play critical roles in the regulation of their metabolism and their uptake into the cells. Clear? So there are basically four, or some books say five types of lipoproteins depending upon their content of triglyceride and cholesterols. These are chylomicrons, very low density lipoproteins, or there are also VLDL remnants called intermediate density lipoproteins, and HDL, that is high density lipoprotein, and it is the protective cholesterol. So chylomicrons, they are formed in the GIT from dietary triglycerides, and they basically transport the triglycerides. VLDL has more concentration of triglycerides than cholesterol. It is synthesized in the liver and is degraded by lipoprotein lipase into free fatty acids for storage in the adipose tissue and for oxidation in cardiac and skeletal muscle. You have already read this in biochemistry. And the low density lipoproteins are rich in cholesterol and they are derived from hydrolysis of VLDL by lipoprotein lipase, and 70% of LDL is removed from plasma by hepatocytes. HDL is also a cholesterol-rich lipoprotein and it is protective in nature. It has anti-atherogenic effect. LDL, VLDL are atherogenic lipoproteins and HDL is anti-atherogenic lipoprotein. It retrieves cholesterol from the artery wall and inhibits oxidation of atherogenic lipoproteins, and it removes cholesterol from tissues to be degraded in the liver. So HDL basically carries away the cholesterol from the peripheral tissues to the liver. It is protective cholesterol. Clear? So the density of lipoproteins increases from chylomicrons to HDL, whereas its size decreases. As chylomicrons are the biggest in size and HDL is the smallest, and density increases down chylomicrons. This is a very important diagram showing the metabolism of lipoproteins, but you don't have to practice it or memorize it. It is just to make a concept that what is happening with the lipoproteins. So let's check out. This is a hepatocyte, this is blood, and its capillary endothelium. These are the peripheral cells. So you all know that cholesterol is synthesized within the liver cells, and HMG-CoA reductase 3-hydroxy-3-methyl-glutyl-CoA reductase is the enzyme which catalyzes this rate limiting step in the biosynthesis of cholesterol. So VLDL is secreted by the liver via Golgi apparatus, and they acquire ApoE and ApoC lipoproteins from HDL. Okay. VLDL is then converted into VLDL remnant or intermediate density lipoprotein by lipoprotein lipases. And in this process, the ApoC and a part of ApoE lipoproteins are given back to HDL. Lipoprotein lipase is the enzyme which is basically present in the endothelial cells, and it is responsible for the hydrolysis of VLDL into free fatty acid that is stored in the adipose tissue and VLDL remnants. Some of these VLDL remnants, they undergo endocytosis directly by the liver, and the remaining are converted to LDL by further loss of triglycerides and ApoE. So this is not having any triglyceride content. This light blue was denoting triglycerides. It is not having any triglyceride, and it is not having ApoE lipoprotein as well. So some of them are directly taken up by the liver cells, and the rest are converted to LDL by loss of triglycerides and ApoE lipoproteins. So the major pathway for the degradation of LDL involves endocytosis by LDL receptors in liver and peripheral tissues. So in this way, LDL is degraded. It is taken up by the LDL present in the liver cells or the peripheral cells. So clear? So we have discussed different types of lipoproteins. Now let's check out what is hyperlipidemia. Hyperlipidemia is basically a metabolic disorder in which the plasma lipoproteins are abnormally increased. It is also known as hyperlipoproteinemia, and it is one of the risk factors for atherosclerosis. And hyperlipemia means increased levels of triglycerides, and it is one of the major causes of acute pancreatitis. Atherosclerosis is the deposition of fat at the walls of the arteries, forming plaques, and it impairs the normal blood flow. The lipoproteins that contain ApoB100, they convey lipids to the walls of the arteries, and these lipoproteins are the LDL, IDL, VLDL, and lipoprotein A. And atherosclerosis can result in coronary artery disease or stroke. So it is a very serious problem. So how can we diagnose hyperlipidemia? Diagnosis is typically based on medical history, physical examination, and blood tests done after overnight fasting. The person has to fast for at least 10 hours, and then we do the fasting lipid profile of the patient. So in history, we ask about the certain risk factors for cardiovascular diseases, family history of cardiovascular diseases, hyperlipidemia or diabetes. We check for central obesity, hypertension, presence of any risk factors, and there are certain signs which you look for, like xanthomas. Xanthoma is the deposition of fat under the skin, and xanthelasmas is the yellowish deposition of fat in the on the inner canthus of the eyes. So if you see a patient having these signs, you must go for fasting lipid profile. So these are the normal levels. The total cholesterol should be less than 200 milligrams per deciliter. LDL cholesterol should be less than 130 milligrams per deciliter, and HDL cholesterol should be more than 40 in males and more than 50 milligrams per deciliter in female, and triglycerides should be less than 120 milligrams per deciliter. So these are the desirable cholesterol levels. There are different types of hyperlipidemia. There is primary hyperlipidemia and secondary hyperlipidemia. The different forms of primary hyperlipidemia you have already done in biochemistry. These are type 1, 2A, 2B, 3, 4 and 5. Primary chylomicronemia, familial hypercholesterolemia, familial combined mixed hyperlipoproteinemia, familial beta lipoproteinemia, familial hypertriglyceridemia and familial mixed hypertriglyceridemia. These are different types of primary hyperlipidemia. The secondary causes of hyperlipidemias are hypercholesterolemia can be due to hypothyroidism, nephrosis, lipemia, anorexia nervosa, hypopituitarism, corticosteroid excess. So you have to check for all of these secondary causes as well. And hypertriglyceridemia could be due to diabetes mellitus, alcohol ingestion, estrogen, uremia, myxedema, glycogen storage disease, acromegaly, etc. How will you manage a patient of hyperlipidemia? You have made a diagnosis of hyperlipidemia. Now what next? So unless the patient is having a coronary artery disease or peripheral vascular disease, dietary measures are initiated first. First of all, we try to control it by dietary modifications, like we'll ask them to avoid saturated fatty acids and use unsaturated fatty acids, use plant fats, like they can use sunflower oil or canola oil or the olive oil, they instead of using animal fats. And they should restrict the calorie intake, because sucrose and fructose, they raise VLDL levels. They should avoid alcohol, and they should consume fish oil which contains omega-3 fatty acids regularly, and they must take vitamin E and C because they act as antioxidants. And they should do some exercise, like 30 minutes of walk or some exercises should be added into their daily routine. They should avoid the sedentary lifestyle. And then we move on to drug therapy. But if the patient is having coronary artery disease or transient ischemic attack or stroke, then of course we will start with the drug, and we'll also advise the dietary changes and exercise along with the drugs. The primary goal of the therapy is to decrease the levels of LDL and increase HDL, because HDL is a good cholesterol, so we have to increase it as well. So different drugs which are available for the treatment of hyperlipidemia are statins. They are also known as HMG-CoA reductase inhibitor, and thus they will inhibit the synthesis of cholesterol. Niacin, which is vitamin B3, fibrates, bile acid sequestrants, and cholesterol absorption inhibitors. These are the 5 groups which are available for treatment of hyperlipidemia. Depending upon the situation of the patient or the severity of the disease, you can choose a single group or you can use a combination of groups. Their classification is very important and is usually asked in exams. So the first class was the statins or HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors. You can see all these drugs, they have a suffix statin in them. These are known as statins or HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors. These are atorvastatin, fluvastatin, lovastatin, pravastatin, rosuvastatin, simvastatin, and pitavastatin. Next is niacin, which is vitamin B3. Then fibrates, fenofibrate and gemfibrozil. Bile acid sequestrants, cholestyramine, colestipol, colsavilam. And cholesterol absorption inhibitors, ezetimibe. You need to memorize these drugs because this classification often comes in exams. So let's discuss the first group, that is HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors or statins. They are structural analogues of 3-hydroxy-3-methyl-glutyryl coenzyme A, which is HMG-CoA reductase, and they are also known as statins. You can see this is the structure of HMG-CoA. It's reduced intermediate, and this is the structure of active form of lovastatin. It resembles to the structure of HMG-CoA. Lovastatin and simvastatin are prodrugs and they are hydrolyzed in GIT2 active forms. By now, you all know what are prodrugs. These are the drugs which are activated inside the body after metabolism. They are usually taken orally at bedtime because most of the cholesterol is synthesized at night. Therefore, they are usually given at bedtime to inhibit the synthesis. Their absorption varies from 40 to 75%, except fluvastatin, which is completely absorbed, and their absorption is enhanced by food. More than 95% are bound to plasma proteins and they are mainly excreted through biliary excretion, and only 5 to 20% is excreted in urine, and plasma half-life ranges from 1 to 3 hours except for pitavastatin, atorvastatin or rosuvastatin. So atorvastatin or rosuvastatin, these are long acting, therefore they can be given anytime during the day, but the other drugs they should be given at night. Their mechanism of action is very important and is often asked in the exam. They are reversible competitive inhibitors of 3-hydroxy-3-methyl-glutyl coenzyme A reductase, which is the rate controlling enzyme in cholesterol biosynthesis, and they are extremely effective in lowering the plasma concentration of LDL cholesterol. Clear? So as their name shows, they are HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, so they will competitively inhibit HMG-CoA reductase enzyme and will inhibit the synthesis of cholesterol. As they act by inhibiting cholesterol synthesis in the liver, so they deplete the intracellular supply of cholesterol, which in turn triggers a compensatory upregulation of hepatic LDL receptors, thus causing increased clearance of plasma LDL. We initially discussed that the major degradation of LDL cholesterol is through its uptake by the liver cells by LDL receptors, right? So what happens when the cholesterol synthesis decreases, the intracellular supply of cholesterol in the liver, it also decreases and it triggers upregulation of LDL receptors and thus more plasma LDL cholesterol is degraded. Let's try to understand its mechanism of action with the help of the diagram. This will make it a lot easier. So what were statins doing? They were inhibiting the HMG-CoA reductase enzyme, which was required for the synthesis of cholesterol. Clear? So the synthesis of cholesterol is decreased, and low intracellular cholesterol, it stimulates the synthesis of LDL receptors, because the production of LDL receptor is transcriptionally regulated by the content of cholesterol in the cell. When this content decreases, the synthesis of LDL receptors increases, so more and more LDL receptors are synthesized, and increased number of LDL receptor will promote uptake of LDL from blood and thus will decrease the level of LDL cholesterol in the blood. And secondly, decreased synthesis of cholesterol also decreases the secretion of VLDL, because cholesterol is an important component of VLDL. Since a secretion of VLDL is decreased, LDL will be automatically decreased, as VLDL is the precursor of LDL. If you remember, lipoprotein lipase, it acts on VLDL and converts it into LDL. So in this way, the concentration of LDL or the levels of LDL will be decreased in the blood with the help of statins. Clear? Now let's check out the pharmacological actions of statins. Statins, they decrease LDL cholesterol and increase HDL cholesterol. And you know how they decrease LDL cholesterol? Firstly, by upregulating the LDL receptor, which increases the clearance of LDL cholesterol, and secondly, because they are decreasing the secretion of VLDL cholesterol, which is a precursor of LDL cholesterol. And they also increase HDL cholesterol because they reduce the plasma cholesterol ester transfer protein activity. The CETP protein is a plasma lipid protein which facilitates the transport of cholesterol ester and triglycerides between different lipoproteins. Statins also decrease the oxidative stress and vascular inflammation. They improve the endothelial function. They cause plaque stabilization, because after development of atherosclerosis, if the plaque weakens and it dislodges, it is converted into thrombus and then it can result in a heart failure or stroke. So it stabilizes the plaque and it inhibits platelet aggregation and thrombus formation. So these are its beneficial effects, and these effects are not produced with any other anti-hyperlipidemic drug. So you might get this question in your exam, that why statins are useful in cases of myocardial infarction or stroke. So the answer would be because they decrease oxidative stress and inflammation, they improve endothelial function, they cause plaque stabilization and inhibit platelet aggregation and thrombus formation. Now their therapeutic uses. They are used as adjunct to diet in treatment of all hyperlipidemias. As they are decreasing LDL, they are decreasing VLDL, and they are increasing HDL. They are used in treatment of all sorts of hyperlipidemias. And they are also given for primary prevention of coronary events, like for primary prevention of myocardial infarction, and for secondary prevention of cardiovascular events like transient ischemic attack or stroke. So if a person has all the risk factors of myocardial infarction, you have to give this drug for prophylaxis. And if a person already has a transient ischemic attack or stroke, we need to add statins in his prescription to prevent a secondary attack. So this is really important, you might get in exam. And now you know that they are stabilizing the plaque and they are inhibiting the formation of thrombus. That's why they are used to prevent MI and stroke. Their adverse effects are really common and they are often asked in the exam. So before starting the therapy with statins, we ask the patient to get his LFTs, liver function test, and CK creatine kinase levels checked, because we want to have a baseline, as they cause elevation in the serum aminotransferases up to 3 times. So we should have a baseline for comparison. And they also produce myopathy in which creatine kinase is increased. So we need to have a baseline for comparison. And myopathy can be severe in some cases. It can lead to myoglobinuria, which will result in renal injury and rhabdomyolysis. And the risk of myopathy increases when they are given with other lipid lowering drugs which produce myopathy, like fibrates, and or if they are given with other cytochrome P450 inhibitors like erythromycin, cyclosporin, verapamil, or ketoconazole. They also increase the fasting glucose levels. So if no symptoms appear, we just continue therapy. We check these levels at baseline, then after 1 to 2 months of the therapy, and if the levels are stable, then every 6 or 12 months we'll check them. But if the patient comes with malaise or anorexia, then the drug should be stopped. And if aminotransferase levels are more than 3 times the baseline levels, then the drug should be stopped immediately. Similarly, if the patient comes with muscle aches, weakness, or tenderness, then we stop the drug immediately and we measure the CK levels. And if they are elevated, we stop the therapy. There are also some rare adverse effects like hypersensitivity reactions in the form of lupus erythematosus, peripheral neuropathy, or autoimmune myopathy. So this is a mnemonic to remember its adverse effects: HMG CoA reductase inhibitor. So H, hepatotoxicity; M, myopathy; myalgia, myositis; GIT upset, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea; cataract, rhabdomyolysis, and increased risk of diabetes. So you can remember this mnemonic to memorize the adverse effects of statins or HMG CoA reductase inhibitors. Now their drug interactions, they potentiate the action of oral anticoagulant and antidiabetic drugs, because they are bound to plasma proteins and they will displace these drugs from the plasma protein binding sites and will potentiate their action. And their concomitant use with amiodarone, verapamil, and gemfibrozil causes an increased risk of myopathy. And their levels are elevated in patients ingesting more than 1 liter of grapefruit juice daily, because it is an enzyme inhibitor, and enzyme inhibitors, they increase the levels of statins. Statins are usually contraindicated during pregnancy and lactation because they cross the placenta and are secreted in the breast milk. And as cholesterol is important for the normal development of the fetus and the kid, so statins can produce serious problems. and the effects of high cholesterol are not evident for many years or even decades. So if the mother won't take statins unless she has delivered the baby or she has started weaning, it won't produce long-term risks. So it is best to wait, and it is usually not given in children until the age of 16 years or before the age of 8 years, until CNS myelination is complete. It is usually avoided in children. It is not given in active liver disease. It is used with caution and in decreased dose in patients with hepatic disease and in elderly, and it is temporarily discontinued in event of serious illness, trauma, or major surgery. So that's it. We are done with HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors or statins. So all of those drugs, they end in statin, like atorvastatin, simvastatin, etc., and they should be best taken at night time, and they are taken orally. Their mechanism of action was really important. They are competitive inhibitors of enzyme HMG-CoA reductase and thus inhibit the synthesis of cholesterol, and the decreased intracellular level of cholesterol, it triggers the formation of more LDL receptors, hepatic LDL receptors, which will bind more LDL cholesterol from the plasma and will decrease the level of LDL in the plasma. And they also decrease the secretion of VLDL, which is a precursor of LDL cholesterol. They are also given for the prophylaxis of myocardial infarction and stroke, and their adverse effects are very important. They increase the levels of ALT, AST. They can produce myopathy. They increase the blood sugar levels. They can produce nausea, vomiting, etc. And they should not be given with other drugs which produce myopathy, like fibrates. And they potentiate the action of anticoagulants because they are strongly bound to plasma proteins, and they displace those drugs from plasma proteins. Next is niacin. Niacin is vitamin B3 and it is given orally. In the body, it is converted to nicotinamide, which is incorporated to cofactor NAD, and without its incorporation into NAD, it is not functional. And niacin, its nicotinamide derivative and other metabolites, they are excreted in urine. Like statins, niacin also decreases VLDL, LDL, and increases HDL cholesterol. Now let's check out how it is doing that. Niacin inhibits the lipolysis in adipose tissue, and this lipolysis was required for production of free fatty acids, and as you know, liver uses free fatty acids for triglyceride synthesis, which is required for production of VLDL. So in this way, the production of VLDL is decreased, and as you know, VLDL is the precursor of LDL, therefore LDL is also decreased. And niacin also increases the clearance of plasma VLDL via lipoprotein lysis, and it decreases the catabolism of HDL and thus increases the level of HDL cholesterol. Clear? So let's try to understand its mechanism with the help of the diagram. So what it was doing, it is acting in the adipose tissue. What it is doing, it is inhibiting the conversion of triacylglycerol to fatty acids. Means it is inhibiting the production of fatty acids in the adipose tissue. And these fatty acids, they were required for the synthesis of triacylglycerol inside the liver for the production of VLDL. So no fatty acids, no VLDL, and no VLDL, no LDL. So in this way, it is decreasing the VLDL and LDL cholesterol, and it also inhibits the catabolism of HDL cholesterol. So what are its pharmacological actions? It decreases VLDL by decreasing its synthesis in liver and by increasing its clearance in plasma by lipoprotein lipase, and decreases LDL due to reduction in its precursor. It induces modest increase in HDL cholesterol by inhibiting its catabolism, and it increases tissue plasminogen activator levels and decreases fibrinogen, thus reverses endothelial dysfunction. So niacin is the most effective medication for increasing HDL cholesterol levels, and it has positive effects on the complete lipid profile. So it is useful for patients with mixed dyslipidemias. You can get this in MCQ, that it is the most effective medication for increasing HDL. It increases HDL by 20 to 30%. and it is the only agent that reduces lipoprotein A. This is also an important MCQ. And it is also used to treat hypercholesterolemia caused by nephrosis. So the important points to remember are that it increases HDL to the maximum as compared to other drugs, and it is the only agent that reduces lipoprotein A. Niacin has so many adverse effects, and that's why they are often asked in exams. So you have to remember them. It produces harmless cutaneous flush. The patient might experience vasodilation and warmth, and you have to tell them that it is harmless, and tachyphylaxis to this flushing will develop within a few days. But if it is disturbing the patient, you can ask them to take aspirin 1.5 hours before niacin or ibuprofen once daily, and this flushing results from stimulation of prostaglandins by subcutaneous Langerhans cells via the niacin receptors. That's why they can be blocked by aspirin, because this is due to stimulation of prostaglandins. And they can complain of pruritus, which is itching, rash, dry skin, and pruritus and rash is due to histamine release. And acanthosis nigricans, it is due to insulin resistance. This is acanthosis nigricans. These are hyperpigmented hyperkeratotic plaques in the skin folds. This is the nape of the neck, and this is the underarms. It can cause nausea, abdominal discomfort, hepatotoxicity. It can impair carbohydrate tolerance due to increase in insulin resistance. Can produce hyperuricemia because it inhibits the tubular secretion of uric acid. So if a patient is having gout, you won't give him niacin. It can produce red cell macrocytosis, reversible platelet deficiency, arrhythmias, and macular edema. The patient will report blurring of distant vision. So these are the adverse effects, and you have to memorize them because these are often asked in the. It is contraindicated in gout because it inhibits the tubular secretion of uric acid and produces hyperuricemia. It is contraindicated in peptic ulcer because it stimulates histamine release, which will increase the gastric acid production, in hepatotoxicity, and if a patient is having acanthosis nigricans. And if the patient develops acanthosis nigricans due to niacin, you immediately stop that drug. Now it's the quiz time. You have to write down the question number and their answers. You don't have to write down the statements, okay? Increased serum levels of which of the following is associated with decreased risk of atherosclerosis? Which of the following drugs should be avoided during pregnancy because of a risk of harming the fetus? If the patient has a history of gout, which of the following drugs is most likely to exacerbate this condition? During treatment with atorvastatin, it is important to routinely monitor serum concentrations of which of the following? So that's all for today. I hope you have understood the topic. If you have any query, you can ask that in your WhatsApp group, or you can directly message me as well, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Please take the picture of the assignment and send it in the WhatsApp group for attendance. We'll continue this tomorrow, inshallah. Have a good day. Take care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.